Hello, hello, Gothamites. Welcome to another episode of the Arkham Sessions. My name is Brian Ward. With me, as always, the psychologist to the superheroes, superheroines, and supervillains of Gotham City, Dr. Andrea Letamendi. Hello, Andrea.
Hello, hello. How are you?
I'm doing very well, and I'm very happy to be back. It's been a long time. It's been, it's about a month almost. Not since WonderCon have we been sitting here recording an episode.
I have missed this.
Yeah.
Of course, we've had a lot going on, so it's been a busy month, but I'm so happy to be back.
Yeah, and it looks like things are going to be settling down here in the next little while. So there's nothing that I foresee coming up.
I foresee some interesting news, but we'll...
Interesting news, but not news that will keep us from recording another show next week and the week after and the week after and the week after.
No, exciting announcements that will actually pretty much dictate that we will be doing this on a weekly basis.
That's true. So keep tuned in. We will be sure to let you know everything that's going on, maybe as soon as next week's show. So, and there will be a show next week, but we got to get through this one first. So let's we're going to stay on track. We're going to talk, but first we've got to do a little bit of maybe a little housekeeping, Drea, because like I said, we haven't actually had a show up and running since before WonderCon, and I feel like that we need to seriously thank the people who showed up to our panel at WonderCon. We did the psychology of it was fiction, it was insanity in fiction, and that panel was fantastic. I wasn't sure how it was going to be received.
I wasn't sure anyone would show up.
Well, it was at night, on a party night at WonderCon, and I know we've had that situation before with our psychology of Star Trek versus Star Wars panels, but with those, you've always got the built-in audiences that love Star Trek and Star Wars and love seeing the two franchises go head to head.
Right, that's a given.
We always fill a room for that. This was brand new. This was insanity in fiction. We had some amazing panelists. We had Javier Grillo-Marxuach, who is a producer and a writer for shows like Lost and The Middleman, and he was an amazing panelist. We also had Brendan Fletcher, who we finally got an opportunity to meet. I got an opportunity to meet in person. You had met him before at Comic-Con.
Oh, that's right. I interviewed him.
You interviewed him for
last year
Comics
at Comic-Con, right?
Yeah, and he's one of the members of the team behind Batgirl right now, and he's also co-writing what is probably my favorite book in the DC universe right now, if not in any of the universes, Gotham Academy. Love that book so much. And if you guys aren't reading it but love Batman the Animated Series, you absolutely should,
yes,
because there might be a nice sized nod to Batman the Animated Series in that book, and you should absolutely check it out, Gotham Academy. And Brendan was an absolute pleasure to be able to talk to on that panel. We also had Jody Houser, one of the co-writers of IDW's Orphan Black. We had Margaret Scott, who's writing the Transformers Windblade series. We had Zach Stentz, screenwriter behind X-Men First Class and Thor. It was an amazing, amazing panel.
So much fun.
And you were fantastic on it, breaking down the psychology of fiction.
Right. Well, the premise of this panel is a little different than the ones we've done before, in that we're kind of breaking down and dissecting fiction, and we're asking writers to talk about how they create characters, how they handle psychological illness, treatment, representation. I mean, all those interesting questions.
And how important it is to get it right. Is it just lazy storytelling to say that guy's crazy? Or do you actually put in the effort to learn why that person is quote unquote crazy or insane? And you guys knocked it out of the park.
Well, thank you for moderating and for asking excellent questions.
Yeah, it was just my job to ask the questions. You guys gave the great answers, and we want to publicly thank all of the panelists that joined us. And we also want to thank all of you that ended up coming to the panel, because we had a number of people afterward. We must have been standing outside for a good half hour just talking to people who were coming up, not just talking about our panel, but also saying that they were listeners of the show. And so I want to thank all of you for showing up and for talking to us afterward. It made us feel really good. And then I think, 2 weeks later, we did Star Wars Celebration, and that was amazing. We put a couple of photos up on Facebook and on the Twitter page, but, we didn't have a panel there or anything. It was just as attendees. But if you love anything, it's Batman and Star Wars, specifically the Empire. So, that was a blast just to be able to hang out there as attendees.
Well, and what a cool idea. Celebration actually has a podcast room. And so each day there were various podcasters that had their show and got to kind of discuss the announcements, take another look at the trailers, take another kind of peek into some of the character involvement. And so I think that that's a really excellent feature of Celebration. I got to see my friends from Full of Sith podcast.
That was a really good podcast.
Yeah, it's a great podcast. And so, fun time at Celebration.
I like the idea of a podcast stage. I like the idea of a room, a dedicated panel room right there for podcasters. From 1 hour to 1 hour, it's one show, then another show, then another show, and all the podcasts got an opportunity to own that room and have a live podcast. That is a fantastic idea. It's an idea that I wish that Comic-Con International would take up with WonderCon and Comic-Con.
Is that a hint?
I wish it were a hint. I wish I had something that I was hinting toward. But I will say that that is a great idea, and I think that the Arkham sessions would do pretty well at a WonderCon or a Comic-Con, where we would get an opportunity, like so many other podcasts, to do live shows.
Yeah. So much fun.
Yeah. Okay. So we're moving away from that stuff. We're getting into the new stuff.
Daredevil.
You know what? That's not a bad idea. We should actually, if you guys haven't been watching Daredevil on Netflix, I highly recommend it. It's not exactly what I expected, being a big Daredevil fan when I was growing up, but it's pretty close to what I grew up with. If you're going to turn it into a 13-episode TV series, or whatever. But we should consider an entirely different podcast just dedicated to the psychology of Daredevil.
I actually disagree that it would be an entirely different podcast, because obviously the animated series is going to come to a close, right? We only have how many? 80 some episodes in the vault. And so, I guess we could ask listeners, what should we do after that? Should we put this, should we actually end it and move on to something different?
You know what?
Should we continue with the Batman theme and move on to Batman Beyond? We've tackled movies before. We've tackled DC related movies, right? We've discussed
Batman specifically. We've done Batman, the Tim Burton '89 film. We've done the Suicide Squad animated film,
Assault on Arkham.
We did Mask the Phantasm, which we are putting into canon with Batman the Animated Series.
Right.
So I guess the question would be, for fans, when we're done with this in another 30 episodes, what would you like to hear? Would you like to hear us go on to something like was it Batman Beyond or Daredevil, or would you like us to do the Christopher Nolan movies?
That's right. Someone did suggest that, which is an excellent direction as well.
And we've always talked about the possibility of, like we have done in the past, going off and doing a special episode where we focus on Assault on Arkham or something like that. At one episode at a time. I don't know, maybe we spend an episode doing all 3 Christopher Nolan movies, or maybe we spend an episode per movie going from Batman Returns on up. It's going to take a lot to make me watch either Batman Forever or Batman and Robin. But,
that would be so much fun.
It's something that we can certainly discuss. And no one said we had to stick to DC, but, we are the Arkham sessions. So right now, I feel like we would be doing a great injustice not to discuss this week's episode. And this week's episode is Paging the Crime Doctor. Are you excited, Drea?
I am, as long as I am not the crime doctor.
I can't make any promises. For those of you who don't know, or maybe don't remember from our first episode, Drea was written into Batgirl as Barbara Gordon's psychologist, and you have done what seems to be the impossible. You've had 2 appearances in the comic so far, and you are not evil yet. So
Not yet.
Congratulations.
Thank you. To my knowledge, I'm still an ethical, professional, healthy, pro-social psychologist. I'm one that has not gone bad yet. And there are very few physicians, scientists, doctors, psychiatrists, psychologists, you name it.
Yeah, we're going to say anyone with doctor in front of their name. Very, very few good ones.
Right. Well, and this is especially relevant to the episode that we're going to be talking about today.
By the way, something that I would be remiss if we didn't say, we mentioned it on Facebook, we mentioned it on Twitter, and I feel like we should mention it now. If you want the opportunity to re-watch these episodes, if you don't have the DVDs and you don't want to go to YouTube or wherever, or God forbid you illegally be downloading or streaming these, you can absolutely watch these shows now on Amazon. They have put that up on their Amazon Prime streaming service. You can watch them 1 episode at a time. You can watch them per season. We're not being paid to say this, but I feel like so many people have said that they love listening to our show and their analysis, and that they're remembering the shows from when they were kids. Now you've got an opportunity to go through and watch every single one before we talk about it,
Right.
or after we talk about it.
Right. Or just the favorites that, that people
Yeah.
remember. They don't necessarily want to watch all of them,
Yeah.
Which I totally get. I know people have approached me and said that there are probably 5 or 6 that that are memorable to them.
Yeah.
So it's kind of cool that you can kind of
Yeah, it's right there.
explore
It's
that.
it's streaming now on Amazon Prime, so go check those out and then take a listen to the show. So let's talk about Paging the Crime Doctor. Okay, so this one actually starts out. Who would have guessed? At night, and there is a armored vehicle going through the streets of Gotham. Suddenly we hear sirens, and they do the right thing. They say it's an emergency vehicle. Let's let them pass. Except that emergency vehicle then unloads a barrage of bullets into the armored vehicle. Now it's armored, so the guys inside are okay. But the guys end up flipping the vehicle up along the side of the road, and sure enough, they're robbed of its contents. There's a box in there that they want. What is in this box? We find out that the armored vehicle was carrying an experimental medical prototype laser. Now, the interesting thing about this laser, not that lasers haven't been used for medical purposes before, but this medical prototype laser looks like a rifle. It is a handheld cannon of a weapon, basically, and can be pulled. A trigger can be pulled in order to launch this laser. And I'd like to see the doctor who's using this
It's
in any sort of
gigantic.
surgical.
It's like something out of a sci-fi movie. And not only that, but it's labeled on the equipment, on the instrument, medical laser.
Yeah. Medical prototype laser.
Medical prototype laser.
Yeah.
I don't know what that's for. I mean, I guess it's some kind of
I just want a
innovative
doctor
tool.
to be like, nurse, hand me the medical laser, and then she gives it to him, and then you just hear,
Right.
Stand back, everybody. I'm going to be using this. It is a scary looking device.
You would never have the physician actually pointing it and maneuvering it, right? Like that's something that robotics would take care
Yeah.
of. So it's a little bit of an odd. Yeah, it's the early '90s.
Yeah,
So
that's true. Batman ends up breaking up this robbery, and then that's when they pull out the laser and decide to use it in self-defense, aiming it and firing it at Batman, actually burning a scar, like straping his cowl and taking off a little bit of the ear and doing a little bit of damage. pushing him, down to the ground. He ends up getting a mild concussion from this brawl that he has with them. They get away with the laser, and we find out that these guys had been hired by our old friend Rupert Thorne, and he is delivering the laser as it seems to be a gift to a doctor who is there performing operations by the name of Matthew. And Matthew's last name is also Thorne. Dun, dun, dun. Matthew is the brother of Rupert Thorne, and he is a bit of a mob doctor. He is a guy who lost his license by removing a bullet from Rupert early on in his career and didn't report it.
I would have reported that bullet to the police, as I was supposed to. But no, you insisted.
Every state has their own, legal requirements and standards in regards to medical and mental health professionals and what we are required to do. So our understanding is that he should have legally reported some kind of crime, some evidence, and he did not.
Yeah.
So he was found out and he lost his license.
But he's still been practicing medicine for Rupert and his mob by being their mob doctor.
Sure.
And he's bitter about this. It's not something that he's happy about. And you get the sense that he's been doing this for a long time, but you also get the sense that at no point in time does he ever see Rupert without reminding him that Rupert's the reason that he lost his license.
Well, and he makes a comment.
What I want is to be a real doctor, Rupert, with a respectable practice.
So there's this clear sort of ethical discrepancy between these two brothers.
Yeah. You've got a guy who's very much a criminal, and then you got a guy who is a guy who wanted to do the straight and narrow, wanted to be a respectable doctor, wanted to do things right, wanted to help people, and now the only people he's helping are criminals who have been injured doing illegal activities. And you got to wonder what kind of stress that puts on somebody. But let's also talk a little bit of the ethics of that. Someone who knew what they wanted to do in life, knew the sorts of consequences that go with going against those laws or that oath that they took. And let's talk about the idea of this guy going along with his brother illegally. With what you know about Matthew, talk a little bit about him.
Well, it seems like he would have multiple conflicting loyalties, right? So he's got family. He's got his brother who is asking him to do something that's against his professional ethics. Mm-hmm. Then he has the mob culture, right? What happens to you if you go against the mob? I mean, they'll kill you, right?
Right.
So here on the one hand, you have your professional ethics, and then you have, your family member asking you to be loyal to him, and then you have this just, complete grave truth, reality, really, that if you report this, you'll likely be killed or something terrible will happen to you.
Right.
So I feel like he was, the little that we know about him, he was stuck in this moral dilemma, this ethical dilemma. And it sounds like he chose to live. But even though he chose to live, he's still saving people's lives. My understanding is that when people are, injured and their life is in peril, he is brought in to save them. So maybe saving people's lives and healing them is part of his way of reconciling, that decision that he made.
And let's talk a little bit about just general medical ethics. Now, I know that you are not a medical doctor, you're a psychologist, obviously, but what sorts of roles do ethics play in this sort of thing? Not just legalities, but someone's sort of moral compass.
It's a huge deal. I mean, of course, mental health and medical health professionals have different oaths, different pledges, but ultimately the fundamental principle of not doing harm is shared by most professionals in the in human services, right? So there's that commonality. And, even though one gives an oath or says a pledge, and they may differ depending on where you've graduated and where you're employed and everything, there is not, it's not standardized. We really are governed by the American Medical Association, the American Psychological Association, depending on which organization you're with, who you're licensed with. And of course, as I mentioned, federal and state law are basically built to protect patients, to protect the rights of patients. And so many people know about the Hippocratic Oath. Have you heard of what that is?
I have heard of the Hippocratic Oath, but for those who haven't, Drea, please explain, is the oath the same for everyone?
No, I mean,
is it
no, it's
very
not.
different?
Actually, the do no harm principle many have said that sentiment originates from the Hippocratic Oath, but in fact, that exact wording isn't from that original oath. So that has kind of evolved and transformed over time.
Right.
But what has been particularly universal and has withstood the test of time is that principle. First and foremost, we as professional caretakers ensure that we are not harming other people. In delivering treatment, in evaluation and assessment, in our encounters in every which way with patients, we are constantly focused on not harming that person, or those people. So that's, that is the general principle that really guides a lot of our practice.
So the idea isn't that he lost his license because he broke the Hippocratic Oath. In fact, he was upholding the Hippocratic Oath by helping these people who were in need. Where he went wrong was he didn't report it to the legal authorities.
Right, and that's where things get really gray because, of course, we're all as medical and mental health professionals, we're all adhering to the oath or the pledge, the principle to do no harm, right? But there are many laws that also govern us, and we have to obey these laws. And he, when he violated this particular law, rightly so, his license was taken away from him. So he actually legally cannot practice anywhere.
And one of the reasons that he still does this work for Rupert, not only his love of medicine, but Rupert has basically made it clear to him that he could pull some strings, he knows people in high places, and that he could actually get his brother's license reinstated if he continues to work for him and does, a couple of missions and, help this person.
That's the other piece. One may ask, well, why is Matthew Thorne still employed or still hanging out with the mob? Mm-hmm. Of course, one reason is that if he leaves, they may go after him and kill him.
But it's also all he's ever known,
right.
Like he wanted to be a doctor.
And what you're saying is part of this equation, that he was promised by his brother that his license would be reinstated and that he would practice in a respectful institution or hospital, and that's what he hopes for. I'm not sure how that could happen with Rupert being the
mob boss.
Yeah, I mean that's
but
where
he knows
I wonder.
people who aren't mob boss. Like he's got ties to people maybe in the government or maybe in the he can definitely grease some wheels. He can make some bribes. He
knows someone on the licensing board who can pull a few strings.
But here is the question that comes up because there are doubts, just as you have, Doctor. There are doubts that Rupert would be able to actually do this, or that he's even interested in doing it. Because if he gets his brother's license reinstated, his brother wouldn't be able to continue to do business for Rupert and his men, because he would be on the up and up again. And, he's learned from that mistake. He would never be caught doing, illegal activities again if it meant losing his license again. So there are questions as to whether Rupert's even genuine with this promise. We find out that Rupert, after collapsing in front of Matthew, he has a medical condition.
The tumor's pressing against the aorta, restricting the flow of blood into your heart. Normally, these things are benign and easily removed. But we can't do it here.
He actually needs a hospital. He needs to go somewhere that is, the kind of place that you would actually take someone to have something removed, surgically removed. And Thorne and his men make it clear that no hospitals will be involved, no authorities. You're going to make this happen. And Matthew says,
There must be somebody you could get to help you.
No, they'd never work with me, not voluntarily.
and that's when we're greeted by our old friend and Bruce's, Dr. Leslie Tompkins. It turns out that Matthew, along with Leslie and Thomas Wayne, were known as the Three Musketeers. They were the best of friends. They were inseparable. In fact, Matthew even took the photo of Leslie and Bruce, or Leslie and Thomas, that is on her desk in her office. Mm-hmm. And Matthew and Rupert's men visit her and basically say, you have no choice in this. You've got to help us perform this operation, because she actually declines. She says she's not going to have anything to do with it. She's not even really been in touch with Matthew since he lost his license.
I'd heard things about you, Matt. The word was you were still practicing, without a license. I heard other things, too. Looks like most of them are true.
But she's not going to be a part of it. They end up kidnapping her. And
can I just throw in that kidnapping scene is just a bit dark, and
it is dark.
And I almost want to say it's the way they cut away from it.
It's quite traumatic, yeah, because she does try to get away, and they do. You know, you've got these big men who are standing in her way and making it clear that they have her in their grasp.
Right.
And it isn't a fun scene.
No, it's actually quite terrifying. They grab at her. It goes a bit dark, but you can see that they're holding her down, and mm-hmm. you hear all of this glass breaking, and mm-hmm. You understand that as her fighting back, and it's just it's actually quite a horrific scene there. But again, the animated series, they did that well in that they were using sound and, mm-hmm. and darkness mm-hmm. and other types of ways to kind of get this across. You don't really see anything too direct. But.
Yeah. And one has to wonder, where is the Batman during this struggle? Well, during his brawl with the guys wielding the medical prototype laser rifle, he ends up getting his mild concussion, and Leslie is the one who tells him,
stay in bed the whole day, understand?
Right.
It's a bruise on the brain. You can't go out and fight crime tomorrow night. So Batman is elsewhere, and that has left Leslie, unfortunately, at a little bit of a disadvantage. So she's kidnapped, and she goes and reluctantly helps Matthew perform the surgery for Rupert. Drea, I'm wondering where the code of ethics comes in on a situation like this.
For Leslie.
Yeah. Now, clearly she can't inform the authorities because she was not given that opportunity. But she is now helping Rupert Thorne, and she's practicing this right. illegal activity.
Well, and he has this life-threatening tumor that if it isn't extracted, that he will die. And I think that is probably what is helping her to kind of get through the procedure and to make sense of what she's stuck with. Because again, if she were to protest or try to leave, she knows that they'll try to kill her. Mm-hmm. And so it seems like the only solution is to comply. Now, luckily, they're not asking her to harm someone. They're actually asking her to help someone. And, yes, it's someone who she probably despises. But I think in alignment with saving the life of somebody in what we call non-maleficence in the helping field, I think that she's probably able to get through it pretty well.
So I have to ask, is this a legal loophole? Clearly, Matthew cannot be the one to lead this operation because he doesn't have a medical license, but she does. Could Leslie, in essence, do this operation and have Matthew assist or be there, or whatever? And then, what? She wouldn't necessarily have to report it because it's not an illegal, it's not like a bullet wound like Rupert's was, or, with Matthew's situation with Rupert, it's a tumor.
Right.
So, it's not a crime to remove this tumor from
Well, but it is
Thorne.
but it is a crime to perform any kind of procedure, actually, whether psychological, surgical, you name it, it's a crime to perform and administer something that's not under the guidelines of the board that you're licensed under, or the the AMA or the APA, right? The American Medical Association.
She could essentially lose her license for this as well.
It's unclear, because if someone is in an emergency situation, and, think about it, if there was a natural disaster and somebody is in need of immediate surgical intervention, and, you have a licensed medical professional there, and you give them, the basic tools, something that I'm thinking of like a fire or an earthquake or something where you just need to intervene. That would not be illegal because you're acting in the spirit of non-maleficence and not doing harm, but in providing medical assistance under an area that you have expertise in, right?
Gotcha.
This is kind of an emergency situation, but at the same time, that medical facility, right? So to put some context in this, Rupert Thorne and his mob family, they have this medical facility that's not authorized by anybody, by the city, but it's essentially a fully operational hospital, right? Mm-hmm. So she's able to perform, she has everything that she needs there, and she's able to perform the surgery there. But that facility is not, it's not been approved. It's not governed. It's not overseen by, so
maybe it's one of Rupert's, maybe it's one of his legitimate businesses from which he funnels money or
That's
something
true.
like that. But I guess a legitimate business couldn't stay legit if your head doctor is a guy that doesn't have a medical license.
Right. Well, and that's the other piece too. And I was just going to add, I feel like if it's not owned by Wayne Industries,
Then
is
it can't be
is it legit?
Yeah. We've learned that Bruce Wayne owns all of the medical facilities
Right.
in Gotham City.
And so the legality here is a little bit unclear. It seems to me that what is clear is that she knows she's acting unethically because she protests and because she, wholeheartedly disagrees.
But she's not necessarily acting unethically. She knows the procedure is unethical, but
Yes.
she has protested. She has,
Yes.
her life is in jeopardy if she doesn't do this.
Right.
So I don't think a jury or a jury of her peers of the medical association or whatever, I don't think they would necessarily take her license away for having done this. She's probably safe.
I would agree with your assessment, and the final kind of piece to this is that not everything that's unethical is illegal, and not everything that is illegal is unethical.
Right. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about the Three Musketeers here. We see this photograph and we see the inscriptions on the back of the photograph. It says, "Thanks for all the good times with my two best friends. Love, Matt." Matt was a really big deal in the lives of Thomas and Leslie, but I get the sense that this must have been pre-Martha, because at no point in time is anyone really discussing a friendship between the four of them. It's all those three. And Alfred doesn't even seem to be aware of Matthew so much as...
Yes, I believe your father mentioned him.
I don't necessarily think Martha was in on this clan. Do you?
Oh, I mean, that's a good point. It's clear that they went to medical school together and they were friends. And then at some point, we don't exactly know at what point Matt... went down the wrong path, and at which point Thomas and Martha were, started a family and everything. So that piece is unclear. But what's interesting to me is that this kind of adds an entirely new kind of layer that we've always understood Leslie and Thomas as being great friends, and that, I don't know, that they were, their values and their ethics overlapped well, and we didn't really know about this third person, and so it's kind of mysterious.
Well, but I want to dive a little deeper into the psychology of Leslie a little bit here, and I realize this is entirely speculative, but she has a photograph of her and Thomas, and one would think, well, that's benign. That's a photograph of her with one of her best friends who has passed on, and it's understandable that photograph is in her office. But it was taken by the third member of their trio, which might suggest that, is there still affection somewhere deep down for Matthew? Because this night was taken on an amazing night. It was like right around graduation, he said. And, there must still be something there for that photo to still be there. There's a piece of him in her office.
Wow, that's deep.
I know, it's a little deep. It is a little deep. Well, it makes me wonder, mostly because when she sees Matt again for the first time, she's sort of repulsed by the fact that he did this illegal activity. And when you think about what the illegal activity was, it was simply not telling the police that he removed a bullet from his brother. Is that the kind of thing that would make Leslie abandon her friendship of Matthew?
Yeah, I mean, clearly what had separated them is this violation of his profession and his ethical code. And, But
when you think about it, it's not like he's given drugs to, he's not doing anything that is, he saved a life.
Well, and she also said, I've also heard that she's heard these rumors that it could be that she now believes that she's constructed this idea of him. She believes that he's essentially a mob doctor, and she's, I think that she's created this idea of him, and we know she's forgiving, right? She is the single person who Batman goes to when he feels insecure and unsure and when he wants to give up. And she's quite rational and quite forgiving and tries to be uplifting with Bruce Wayne and tells him that he's doing the best that he can and that his parents would accept and love him. And so I think that she's probably, if anyone in Gotham City, she is the one person who is quite, forgiving in that sense. And so I don't know. I think that I think there could be more to that story, or that she's created this villain out of Matt Thorne that, may not be as accurate, because as this episode unfolds, we get to know him a little bit more, and we understand that he's not a bad guy. He's not like his brother.
Yeah. Yeah. He only ever wanted to be good, and he was put in a really bad situation. The surgery is a success, and Thorne's men are told to take care of Dr. Tompkins, and Matthew says, no, it's okay. I'll walk her home.
Before he went under, Mr. Thorne said to us, when it's over, make sure you shut her up.
In other words, she would do the ethical thing. She would then go and report that she just did this. She would do the thing that Matthew didn't. And Rupert doesn't want that. He wants her killed. And Matthew says, well, if it's going to happen, it's going to happen in a humane way, and you're going to let me be the one to do it. And he fills a syringe with, again, this orange liquid. And he ends up taking it over to her. And what's interesting is the way that she responds.
Of course. That's for me, isn't it? My payment for services rendered.
She anticipated that this would be the end of it.
And a thug grabs her, restrains her, and Matthew goes in to inject her, and instead injects the thug, who then falls over.
Don't worry, it's just a sedative.
But Matthew is giving her the opportunity to escape, and he's going to escape with her. He is showing his true colors. The two of them start to flee when they are nearly caught by other henchmen, of course. And the rest of the episode is basically them trying to escape, jumping from one building to another from the roof. Meanwhile, Batman shows up and is showing effects from this concussion. He is not on it. He is not really 100% on his game. He's allowing more punches to connect with him than he typically would, and I found this to be interesting. That when you've got someone who is suffering from a concussion, think a football player who is, got a concussion on the football field. There's a reason you don't put that football player back on the field. Now,
right.
They're not necessarily. We know people that have played with concussions, but it's not a wise decision. And we're seeing Batman wibbly wobbly, and I really think this episode is great because very little of it has anything to do with Batman. Batman is the guy who's basically there to take out the biggest of the thugs, really, while Rupert's brother, Matthew, is the hero of the episode alongside his old friend, Leslie Tompkins. Mm-hmm. And the two of them have taken control of their own futures, and they're the ones who are fighting for survival, and they're doing it without Batman's assistance for the most part. Now, the show is called Batman the Animated Series, so of course he's the one who takes out the last thug. And then at one moment, Leslie falls from the rooftop, and Matthew is trying to hold on to her and can't. And Batman comes in and saves the day. But this episode is not about Batman. It's a personal episode.
I think so. I think the only component that is about Batman is about the relationship between Leslie and Batman. In the beginning, when he seeks her out to help him with this wound from the laser, right? And she tells him, "You need to rest. You need to take a whole day off. I know you're not going to listen to me, but that's my advice." And then at the end, when he saves her from falling off of this building, and essentially does this Batman move with a grapple hook and everything, and he's carrying her, and she makes this joke about, "I thought I told you to take the day off." But I think this is, one of the few times that she sees what he does, that she's personally involved in his, not just his crime fighting, but his mission, his passion, his hard work. And I think that connecting to him on that level was important for them.
I agree. And it's interesting because he's also given a similar connection now to Matthew Thorne, in that Matt Thorne graduated from medical school with Thomas. And that gives Bruce an extra connection to his father. And we see at the end of this episode, Matt is in a what looks like an interrogation room at the police station, probably the Gotham City Police Department. And Bruce comes in and says,
"I told you I can help you with your legal costs. Maybe even put in a good word with the judge."
Matt isn't going to go to jail. He's probably going to get help from the Wayne Foundation or someone, Bruce Wayne personally. And
Matt's heard this before, right? His brother was always, "Oh, I can help you. I can get you out of this, or let me pull a string or two."
And Leslie actually brings up the doubt. She says, "Do you really think he'll do it? Do you have reason to believe him?"
Right. So rightly so, Matt tells Bruce Wayne,
Sorry, Mr. Wayne. Matthew Thorne is no longer for sale.
Bruce, like a puppy dog, is like, but I don't want you to do anything illegal.
"Tell me about my father."
And the two of them come back to the table, and you can see that Matt is regaling Bruce with tales of Thomas Wayne, at least as far as Matt can, because clearly there was this severed connection. But it's a nice moment at the end of the episode where you get the sense that Bruce is learning something else that maybe he's never heard about his own father. Good,
right,
bad, whatever. It's just this connection that he's getting. And I would be interested in seeing if Matt Thorne becomes a Leslie Tompkins down the road, where sure, he wasn't the one who cradled Bruce in his arms in Crime Alley, but he still has some sort of connection there.
Right. And this is actually an aspect of Bruce Wayne that many people forget about in their, kind of tying him down to being a loner, or someone who isolates himself and is, can't get rid of the past. In that his relationship with Leslie Tompkins, and now this new relationship with Matt, is about connecting with somebody who knew his father well, and not only knew him well, but shared his general, value system. So it's important for him to talk to Matt about, what was my father like? What was important to him? What drove him? What was he passionate about? I think that all leads to this, his core values, right? Where do I get my core values from? I get it from my father, I get it from my mother, and this person knew my father. So just to, an opportunity to learn more about that is really important to him.
Right. So Drea, I don't know if you remember this far back. I'm sure you do. You've got a brain that remembers stuff like a steel trap. The episode It's Never Too Late. This is the one with the two brothers, Arnold and Michael Stromwell. Arnie is the former crime boss that was warring with Rupert Thorne, and Thorne ends up taking over the mob organization from Arnie by the end of the episode. And this episode reminds me so much of It's Never Too Late, because Arnie's brother, Michael, ends up becoming a priest. And Batman uses Michael to help him convince Arnie to get out of the crime business. And by the way, we can touch on this a little bit, because this is a perfect opportunity to discuss the fact that we have never seen Arnold Stromwell in a role of crime boss since that episode. He promised Michael that he would retire from crime, and since then Rupert's been the only crime lord in Gotham City. So clearly,
That's true.
Arnie was genuine in his vow to leave crime behind. But this episode reminds me of that one, in that you've got a crime boss and his brother who was either a victim of the crime that the other brother was committing, or whatever, was the better half of the two, and so I thought it would be interesting to bring that up, given that Rupert, the guy who took crime away from Arnie, now has a brother who you found out was sort of taken down by Rupert.
Right. It kind of puts things into perspective that way, that he understands what it's like to have this, a close a brother who kind of differs in terms of his
and I think
moral compass.
And I think we might run into a situation where now Matthew might be one of the people who could take the stand against his brother if given an opportunity in the future. So you've got a guy who can't be bought anymore, and I just thought the parallels were a little nice. Though it turns out that I'm not the only one who thought about this while watching this episode. We've got an email from Leah, once again bringing up some great questions, and she actually caught on to that as well. And her email says, "What I want to point out are the parallels between the Thorne brothers and the Stromwell brothers in It's Never Too Late. Ironic, since Thorne stole the crime lord throne from Old Man Arnie. See, like minds Like great minds think alike. Lee, I'm on your side. She says, now, both Matthew and Michael are shown to be willing to do anything for their crooked brothers, even at the risk of losing something, be it a license or even a limb. If we remember, Michael actually loses a leg to a train in that episode.
Right, when he was a little boy.
Right. Not really any differences there outside of Matthew's rebellion at the end. However, the same cannot be said about Rupert and Arnie. Whereas Arnie accepted the advice of his brother and retired from the crime game, Rupert seems to have no problem ignoring Matthew's side on anything. Even after this whole mess is done with, there isn't anything to imply that Rupert would have gotten Matt out of jail or reprimand his thugs for having tried to kill Matt. There is no love lost on Rupert's side, and he is quite fine with that.
She actually brings up a really good point that in this story, and in previous stories, Rupert is pretty, he's not empathetic. He's not forgiving. He's just very black and white in his kind of mob mentality, and he manipulates everyone, including what ostensibly is his close brother.
So let's talk about, it sounds like you're now describing some of the folks you've described in previous episodes. We've now seen enough of Rupert Thorne, I think, that if given an opportunity to look at what we've seen, mm-hmm. where would you go with a guy like him?
What makes him any different than the Penguin, than the Riddler, than even the Joker? There's some personality differences and some nuances to their wonderfully characterized features. But essentially, Rupert is an antisocial individual who doesn't care about other people's lives, who just wants. He's willing to destroy people's lives, including this old medical doctor, and is helping out, in one of the scenes in this very episode, she's helping a family, in Gotham City, in what seems like an underserved area of Gotham City. My understanding is that he really would have killed her.
You're talking about Leslie.
Yes.
Yeah. So, yeah. But not only that, he potentially could have killed his own brother.
Right.
And so that's where I think you're absolutely right with everything you have told us in the past about antisocial folk. This is a guy who has no real connection to anyone. He doesn't care that he is the reason that his brother has lost his license, essentially. And he has floated the idea of giving his license back, but we all know there's no real, I don't think Rupert is genuine with that offer. I don't think there was ever a time that he was going to get his license back.
Right.
So, would you go on a limb and maybe throw out the antisocial personality disorder mark toward Rupert Thorne?
Not quite. I'm not sure that we've seen him. Have we seen him directly harm others simply for the enjoyment of harming others? I think that he's quite manipulative, and is he a sociopath? I mean, essentially you're asking if he's completely devoid of understanding other people's feelings and has this, bizarrely unique interest in hurting others.
But maybe I'm wrong. You had mentioned at one point that sort of an antisocial personality might not necessarily have no understanding of those emotions, simply that they don't care.
Right. Yes.
So I don't know that he would necessarily not understand the emotions of the people, he's hurting, but that he just doesn't care that he's hurting them. And I think Rupert, I've not seen him care about anyone.
Yes, I think there is some truth to that. But again, to what degree? I think that there's still a lot we don't know about him, that I would be reluctant to kind of throw that out there. But what we know for now is that we've never seen him show empathy. Mm-hmm. We've only seen him care about his own, his own safety, his own financial gain, his own social gain. So all of that is leading me right to where you're going. But
Right.
I don't know that we have enough information.
Gotcha.
Okay, so I'm curious. You said that Batman isn't really in this episode. He's kind of in the beginning, and later toward the end he swoops in, but this episode is not about Batman.
No.
So why write this episode? Like coming from that perspective, why is this episode in the animated series?
It's a personal episode. It's about family. It's about the extent that you are willing to go for those family members, whether it's good or whether it's bad. The ones that go the right direction, the ones that go the wrong direction. It's about redemption.
For whom? For Matt?
Yes, it's
Okay.
Matt redeeming himself because he's the hero of the story. He's the one who rescues. He's the one who saves the life of his brother, but he's also
Right.
the one that rescues Leslie in the end. So
I would say I don't want to disagree with you, but I actually think this is
then don't.
I actually think this is about Batman.
Okay, all right. I'm interested.
So, okay, come out into the wild with me. This is a wild idea, but every aspect of this comes down to a code, right? You're talking about morality and right and wrong and family loyalty. We've been talking about ethical codes, professional codes. I think that essentially this is about, this is sort of putting the mirror up to Batman's code.
Okay.
Wouldn't you say Batman has a code in the work that he does?
He has said it many times.
So what is his code?
That he is going to, clean up Gotham City, do the right, to undo wrongs. He is going to not kill anyone.
Right. So along with his code, he has this mission, right? And his code has various rules that he's developed along the way. One you mentioned, I'm not going to kill people, right? He doesn't generally use guns. That's a sub code of his I won't kill people code, I think. So there are these principles, right? These general principles that he lives by, he works by, wouldn't you say?
Yes.
So in a way, I think this is about Batman's own struggle with his right and wrong, why he does what he does. I think anytime there's an episode with Leslie, there is this revisitation of questioning whether he's doing the right thing and questioning if he's successful or if he's failing, and ultimately if the way he's doing what he's doing is right. Okay. So I think that it comes down to, in a way, him revisiting those questions of his own professional code and why he does what he does and whether he violates them or not. So I happen to have a list here.
Oh, that is a scary list.
I know. So we talked a little bit about the principle of not doing harm, and I have in front of me the general principles that psychologists are guided by. So like Batman, these are principles that are aspirational in nature. They're intended to guide and inspire psychologists toward the very highest ethical ideals of their profession.
Okay.
So my question to you is, are these true? Would these be similar principles that Batman would have?
Okay.
All right, so let's start with the easiest one. I'm gonna kind of go out of order here. Justice. Would you think justice is a general principle that he would be guided by? Fairness. Would he recognize that fairness and justice are those are things that everyone is entitled to, and that he should ensure that everyone has equal access to those things? Would he ensure that he doesn't have particular biases that keep certain people from achieving justice?
All right. Well, now you're okay. Here you go.
So you said, yeah, justice is important to Batman, but is it?
Justice is important to Batman, but justice is subjective. It's what Rupert Thorne sees as justice might not be the same as what Batman sees as justice. And that last little point there is the one that sticks out, that he has no biases. against anyone. And I don't think that that's true. I think that Batman's bias goes toward always seeing the potential wrong in someone before he sees the potential right. So for him, the justice might not be so easily granted to certain people if he thinks that they're people. Take, for instance, the Penguin. When the Penguin tried to go straight. And, justice could have been done if Bruce and Batman had been willing to see the Penguin as someone who was trying to go on the straight and narrow. But instead, the Penguin ended up becoming a criminal again because he was laughed at by those around him.
So in this sense, that's a very specific example, but it sounds like Batman fails.
I think Batman
Here.
fails, but only if you keep in that last sentence. If you were to take out that last sentence, I think Batman would probably pass that.
Okay. Next one. Respect for people's rights and dignity. That he would respect the dignity and worth of everybody and the rights of the individuals to their privacy, to their confidentiality, to their self-determination. That he's aware that special safeguards may be necessary to protect the rights and welfare of the people of Gotham City, the community of Gotham City, whose vulnerabilities impair autonomous decision-making.
Okay, so he clearly believes that there are certain safeguards that need to be put into place in order to protect those of Gotham City. The problem is he doesn't necessarily seem to have the respect of the individual, in that he will sit outside your ledge and listen to everything you're saying just because he feels like it's important, or he will pummel you for information, or terrify you. He will terrorize you if he thinks you could lead him to somewhere. So for Gotham City in general, yes, I would say that he believes that they all deserve to have good, but the individuals, I still think he leans more toward you're probably a bad person if you live in Gotham City than a good person.
Okay.
So I'm going to say he fails that one too.
That one. Okay. Next. I thought these would be easy.
Okay.
Okay, next. Integrity. That Batman would seek to promote accuracy, honesty, and truthfulness in the science, teaching, and practice of his work. So think what he does with the Batcomputer or the Batcave, thinks what he does with Wayne Technology and Wayne Industries, right? So in those activities, that he would not steal, cheat, or engage in fraud, subterfuge, or intentional misrepresentation of fact. He would, in situations in which deception may be justifiable to maximize benefits of his work, he would have a serious obligation to consider the need and the consequences and the responsibility to correct any resulting mistrust or the harmful effects that may arise from the use of that kind of technique.
I will say that he passes this one, but on... See, Batman wears a mask. And that part about, deception might be necessary in order to...
Totally.
Right. But the last part about, what is the last bit that you said there?
That if there were any harmful consequences of that deception, that he would do everything he could to, to ensure that there would be no resulting harmful he would correct any kind of harmful effect or consequence of that kind of mistrust.
Okay, then I'll give him that one.
How about his accuracy and honesty around the administration of science and practice? That he's, anytime he's engaging in, his detective work, that he's practicing with integrity in that area. I feel like he's pretty evidence-based. He is
evidence-based, but he insists on being right.
But he doesn't create evidence that isn't there, right? He doesn't lie.
He may not read evidence that it goes against his own findings, though. We don't know that. For instance, when we brought up the other day with Mudslide, he insisted that the product his company developed wouldn't be right to help out Matt Hagen, because Bruce isn't the one who came up with it. Was sort of what we boiled it down to. Was like, no, my way is the best way, not that. And
it could be that he didn't have the evidence that other solution actually worked.
That is true, but in doing the evidence, I think Batman is biased in his own evidence-based practices. But that being said, I think every scientist is
That's
probably biased in their own evidence-based practices. So I'll go ahead and give that to him too.
Okay, he gets a B+ for that
yeah.
one. Okay, next one. Fidelity and responsibility. That Batman establishes relationships of trust with those who he works with. That he's aware of their professional and scientific responsibilities to society and to the specific communities in which they work. That he upholds the professional standards of conduct and clarifies his professional roles and obligations with them, and accepts appropriate responsibility for his colleagues' behavior, and seeks to manage conflicts of interest that could lead to the exploitation of the people that carry out his mission in Gotham City. That he would consult with, refer to, and cooperate with others and the institutions to the extent needed to serve the best interests of those with whom he works. And he's concerned about the ethical compliance of his colleagues' scientific and professional conduct. He strives to contribute a portion of their professional time for little or no compensation or for personal advantage.
Because I think the listeners would come at me with pitchforks and torches if I didn't, I will say he probably passes this one.
Why would they come at you with pitchfork? Like, what are you really trying to say here?
You know how I feel about Batman and his personal... Well, the part that strikes me as a little bit awkward in that one is that he develops trusting relationships with his colleagues and those around him, and I think to some degree, I think you're right. I think he does. I think people trust Batman. Well, for the most part, I think certain people trust Batman. I think Commissioner Gordon trusts Batman.
Well,
I think Robin trusts Batman.
Alfred, Commissioner Gordon, I'm thinking about the people that he works with in his profession. But
I don't think Batman trusts everyone he has relationships with. And the reason I say that is we look back again at things like Christmas with the Joker, and he thinks Robin doesn't know what he's talking about when Robin says crime is taking the night off. You know, like it's not that he doesn't trust. Again, this is based on his whole, I have to be right. I think that Batman holds himself higher than everyone else. So I think that other people have reason to trust Batman. But there are people in Gotham City that don't trust Batman. I think Bullock is someone who believes that Batman is out to do good, but is doing it the wrong way. And I don't think Harvey Bullock necessarily trusts Batman. So, I will say that he passes this one, but I will say the trust thing is, it's a two-sided street.
Right.
And I'm not sure that he's always going down both sides.
Gotcha. Okay. Last one here.
Okay.
And it's an important one. Goes back to what we talked about in the beginning of this episode about our first priority being do no harm.
Okay.
Beneficence and non-maleficence. That Batman would strive to benefit those with whom he works and to take care to do no harm. So in his professional actions, he seeks to safeguard the welfare and the rights of those with whom he interacts with and the other affected persons and the welfare of not just people, but animals in terms of science and research. If there are any conflicts that occur among his colleagues, he attempts to resolve these conflicts in a responsible fashion that avoids or minimizes harm.
This is all science based, or are we talking about in general?
General, and when because he does involve science
No, I know,
occasionally.
right.
And then because his scientific and professional judgments and actions may affect the lives of others, he strives to be aware of the possible effect of his own physical and mental health on his ability to help the people that he works with and works for. Ooh, that last one.
Okay, so am I to understand that all of this is just when he's like in a lab doing science, or are we talking about when he's out on the town doing things too?
Great question. Just like professional psychologists, it would be when he's conducting himself, when he's in the role of his profession.
So when he's in the role of
when
Batman.
he's Batman.
All right.
Right.
Then I would say that he fails this one.
What?
Batman shows little regard for the people around him, the safety of the people around him, because while he refuses to kill people, he will absolutely put them in jeopardy. The thugs, he will do things like hang them from sides of buildings and things like that. It scares them. He knows they're safe, but they don't know they're safe, and I think that has something to do with their own mental well-being.
Yeah, I agree with that.
Not only that, we saw him crash through a casino once because he was beating the crap out of the Joker in a helicopter. And that, to me, is a complete disregard for the safety of those around him. Every single time he's driving through the streets of Gotham City at breakneck speeds in the Batmobile, things exploding around him, there's no real...
You don't think he's minimizing harm in those situations?
No, I don't. I think that we have discussed in previous episodes that Batman doesn't necessarily he is laser focused on the person he is fighting, not necessarily on the people around him. And so I wouldn't necessarily say that part of that statement is accurate. I think generally, if it's to paraphrase Bette Midler, from a distance.
Oh, that's terrible.
I think he fits that. But if you really start looking at it and you start looking at every little thing, I'm not sure Batman fits that first one. The second one is, does he make sure that those around him keep the safety and well-being of I would say that he does that. Yeah,
like when he sees conflicts, he attempts to minimize those conflicts so that people, innocent people, are not being harmed.
But, and again, I think this goes toward the ego a little bit. I think Batman has to always be right, and so he will stop Robin from killing his parents' killer.
Right.
I think he will stop a wild beast from going after his creator, and things like that. I think that he will try to minimize that as best he can. So yeah, I'll give him that second one. The third one is what now?
Well, he would strive to be aware of the possible effect of his own physical.
No. He fails this one. He fails this one without a shadow of a doubt. It doesn't. Once again, I mean, just look. He puts the cowl on while he's got a concussion and he's all wibbly wobbly, can't fight properly.
Right.
He doesn't care that he is playing through the pain.
So essentially that piece is around the idea that once we know our physical or mental conditions would interfere with our ability to do no harm, that would lead us to kind of need to take action.
Right. Batman doesn't care. Mentally, he feels like he's always on top of it. I don't think we've ever seen a moment where he was like, maybe I shouldn't do this because I'm not 100%. and then, physically, just in this episode, we saw him go against that.
Stay in bed the whole day, understand?
Right.
So I don't think he passes that one at all.
Oh,
so,
gosh.
Tally our score up, good doctor.
All right. So he didn't do so well on justice. Mm-hmm. He didn't do so well with the respect for people's rights and dignities. Mm-hmm. He got like a B+ on integrity.
Right.
He did okay with fidelity and responsibility.
Okay.
Sounds like he got a C on beneficence, on the do no harm one of the.
I don't know how you can
general-
fail 2 out of 3 categories in the question and get a C, but
well-
that's a straight
Remember,
F.
it's a general principle. So
All right. Okay. So
Well-
so in your estimation, where does Batman fall in this the scale of ethics?
I think that he has distorted these the ethics code
Right.
to kind of
To work for himself.
To work for himself. Again, these are the ethics code of psychologists, so they're not necessarily the superhero code.
Right.
But it's interesting that the generally speaking, I would think that he would do quite well with these, but it sounds like
I think
sounds
if
like
you
he didn't.
I think if you were to just read the headlines of all of those things, I think Batman is spot on. I think everyone would be
Okay.
like, "Yep, he's the hero we all need." But I think the more you start reading descriptions as to what those mean,
Yeah.
then you start getting into trouble.
That's a good point. So tell us what you think. Did he actually do better than we said? Did he do worse? Should we not even be applying these principles? Does he have a different set of principles we should be thinking
I
of?
like applying these principles. I think these are good. I think grading him based on this is exactly where I want Batman. And this is right around the time that I'm going to solicit for all the hate mail to come at me because I broke down Batman a little bit. Just calling them like I see them. Drea, ultimately, what'd you think of this episode?
Again, if I look at it like this is an opportunity to reflect on Batman's code and to think about why any of us do what we do and how we're adhering to our own professional and personal code, I think it's a good episode.
Yeah, it is a great episode. I like it a lot. Next week's episode, we are returning with more Paul Dini. So, this is going to be fantastic. But more than Paul Dini, we're bringing in someone new. We're going to be introduced to a certain lady magician.
Yes.
I know.
Finally.
I know you're very excited. Next week, we're going to take a look at Zatanna. That's coming up then. Until then, Drea, where can folks find you?
On Twitter, I'm at Arkham Asylum Doc, and my website is underthemaskonline.com.
You can find me on Twitter at bward028. You can also talk to both of us on Twitter. We are at Arkham Sessions. Be sure to email your questions, your comments. Really let us have it for this episode. Over at Gmail, we are arkhamsessions@gmail.com. And until next week, I am Brian Ward.
I'm Dr. Andrea Letamendi.
And we are
The Arkham Sessions.